Then we did predict that suburbs would go into decline, and in 2012, the U.S. Census Bureau confirmed that that was the first year when cities were growing more than suburbs. And now this will be continuing for the rest of our lives. Poor people will move to the suburbs. And in the last few months, we're getting information from people living in suburbs about how the demographics of their suburbs are changing. They're getting older, they're getting poorer, more rental units, as high-earning individuals move back into the center city. Why? To conserve time. It's all about time. And so they are moving downtown. This is the St. Paul Depot, and I will end with the St. Paul Depot where President Obama was just a couple of weeks ago. But this is the parking lot across the street from the St. Paul Depot. It's been a parking lot for 30 years, not any longer. Somebody is going to buy that right there and put a 65-unit apartment site right on there next to the train station. And that is in one picture what's going on all over the United States. You're looking at it statistically. The blue is the cities, the red are the suburbs, and that's what's happening and happening again all over the country. Number three, there's no solution. You heard the congressman this morning. He's clueless about how to fund highways, because if you charge the users for driving, they drive less, plus Gen Y is not driving. They're not gonna drive. And then people are telecommuting and they don't drive. I'm a telecommuter, so my driving has dropped by half. And then people over 65 don't drive like they did when they were 45. And so we have the boomers, the largest generations, not driving, and the youngest, biggest generation not driving. There's no answer. And so right now, when you drive, 50% of that is funded by the rest of us, by taxpayers. If you take a train, if I take a train from St. Paul, it would be Red Wing where I would get on, to Milwaukee, you pay less if I take a train as a taxpayer than if I drive. And so there's no solution to funding highways except to decommission the highways. And we were talking about this on the way up down here this morning, that paved roads will start to become gravel roads, and not all of them, but in rural areas.
It's already happening in Michigan.
It's already happening because there is no solution to funding highways. And if you say, oh, we'll just have the taxpayers pay for it, well, the kids aren't going to live in a state that has only highways. And that's why all the kids in Wisconsin are moving to Minneapolis, Chicago, Portland, and Seattle, because they can take trains. So you won't even have the tax base there. Number four, this is the first year where boomers are starting to think about safety and fatalities. Now, baby boomers have two things that they have as goals in life. The first is to live forever, and the second is to drive forever. But they're going to have to choose. And so baby boomers are going to have to choose between riding in a passenger car with fatalities and taking a train where they can be safe. This is a chart of drivers and the fatality accident rate. So there's 16-year-olds way up there. But look at the blue line. If you're a baby boomer and you drive like you used to drive, look at your fatality rate. It's like twice as high as a 16-year-old. It's just, it's unfathomable what the danger and the death toll is out there. Got a doctor from Minocqua called into Wisconsin Public Radio, and he says, I have this big dilemma. He said, the children of adults who come in here are asking me to flunk their aging parents for the driver's test, saying they don't have good eyesight. And they have good eyesight. They just don't want them to drive. And he doesn't know whether to flunk these elderly people or to pass them and give them this kind of scenario there.
I moved to Florida.
Die in Florida. So we will start to see a a famous person will die in the next 3 years. That will change how we view safety on the highways. And then the last thing, of course, is that train ridership continues to grow. Vehicle miles traveled continues to decline. This is where new transit, light rail and trains are being built all over North America. They're building them all over the place. And then just look at the future, and then I'll take any questions or comments that you have. But here's what we are predicting the future will be. Number one, the Democrats will win the presidency in 2016, but the Republicans will win in 2020. And one of the reasons that they will win in 2020 is that they will embrace what Gen Y embraces. Gen Y is the generation that put the current president in office and got him reelected. If only people over 40 had voted, we would not have this president. But by 2020, one of the things that mainstream Republicans will embrace is trains. And I think we saw from my point of view, this is my personal view, the appearance of Congressman Petrie here, a Republican, not really talking about trains for the last 5 years, combined with Tommy Thompson stating publicly his support for high-speed rail. That, to me, is a turning point for our state and maybe even larger. Interestingly enough, if you follow politics, this is fascinating. This chart blew me away. But in 2020, this is a chart of the distance between the parties, the polarization. And we are very polarized right now, and we haven't been this polarized since 100 years ago, when we were arguing over agrarian society versus industrial society. But around 1920, everybody agreed. We're in the industrial society. We're going to have cars. We're not going to have carriages. We're going to have suburbs. We're not going to have farms. And then the polarization dropped because everybody understood what the game was. Still Democrats and Republicans, still different views about that. But the basic things about life they agreed with. And so by 2020, Republicans will embrace passenger trains, but they will increasingly advocate for something different than we have today. And they will win, we predict, based on history. Just looking at history, Republicans will propose that instead of the tracks being owned by the private sector and the trains being run by the public sector, that we switch it. That the tracks be owned by the public sector and the trains be run by the private sector. This is what we have in all of the other major areas of our transportation system. The public owns the river, the private company runs the barge. The public owns this airport as well as TSA, but Delta and Boeing make the airplanes. In our highways, you and I pay for the highways, but Ford and General Motors and the bus companies and the truck companies run the private ones. And so this is likely to be the scenario for trains in the next decade, because this has pretty much been our history. So who will run the trains? Well, I got a 20% bet on these five. I got a 20% bet on Amtrak. Done a marvelous job. I love Amtrak. They have gotten us through the dark ages of passenger trains. But of course, the Congress doesn't fund Amtrak. And of course, everybody says the government can't do it as well as the private sector. And that's the primary reason why Gen Y will turn to the private sector, is because Amtrak, on the one hand, will continue to get squeezed on budgets. On the other hand, we continue to say we can do it better than the government. So I got a 20%, only 1 out of 5 chance on Amtrak. I got a 1 out of 5 chance out of European train companies. They know what they're doing. They know how to run trains, but they're not American. And we just don't do that kind of thing over here. We somehow think that Siemens will not protect us in the case of a world war or something, I don't know what, but I got a 1 out of 5 bet on European train companies. I got less than a 1 in 5 shot on Ford and GM. If you look at our book there, we have a picture of the GM website. And this is the GM website in 2001. It's got a train on it. But GM, I thought it was their plan B or C, but no, they sold the train division. There's no, when I was home in Fond du Lac, it's a manufacturing town, and so I was sitting there talking to a manufacturing guy, and I said, you know, just say, how long would it take Detroit to switch from making cars to making trains? And the guy said, 3 months. That's all it would take for Detroit to switch around. Of course, they switched around during World War II to making planes within 12 months, but they're faster now. This is the one where you gotta say, wow, they're making a move on this, because the airlines have a huge stake in our transportation system. And you notice all the trains stopping at airports. You notice that the former head of Northwest Airlines proposed a train for the Northeast Corridor, and he proposed that the train only stop at airports. And so this is one that you gotta kind of think about, because this is what they do for a living, is schedule things to be on time and to give you a sandwich and a free Coke there on the airlines. And so this is a candidate to look at. And then the last one is other. Certainly Richard Branson is going to be involved in something if he has any choice in it. But there's other people and other companies that maybe will step up to the plate and want to have a share of the action. So around 2020, we'll start to see a growing chorus of we need the trains to be run by the private sector. You can already see the emerging seeds of this development now, but it will be very loud by then. Both parties will accept trains, and the big switch will be when the track is assumed by public expenditures. Let's go back to the St. Paul Depot. You have a couple of months maybe to be on the edge of history to see this. This is an empty train station.